Okay. For the month of May on Wednesday nights, as you can see, what we're doing is just a 4-week short course that we've entitled Every Part Has a Place. And hopefully is an opportunity for us to think about what our place is in this thing that we call the church. And because I'm a part of this church, you're a part of this church. If you're a member at Palm Beach Lakes, you're a part of this church. Last week we talked about the fact that, what is it that's required to make a car? And we started mentioning a whole lot of different things when it comes to making the different parts that it required to make a car, but you also came to realize how many different things aren't really necessary. Really the manufacturers put those things on your car, the things that are not necessary, so that they will break, so that you have to take it in and pay the big bucks to get it fixed. I'm just a conspiracy theorist kind of guy. I think they put those fancy radios and all those fancy gadgets on there so that your daddy can't fix it anymore. You got to take it in to somebody and pay them big bucks. Anyway, that's off subject, but what we said about that was that you got all of these accessories that you don't have to have a car. You can have a running car without some of these accessories. But the point we're making about that in relationship to us as Christians is to say that none of you are an accessory. None of you as a part of this church are accessories. To say we don't need you, we could get along without you. All right? So, I want you to think about another example tonight. Probably wouldn't surprise you. I've got a lot of shirts like this hanging in my closet. It's kind of the go-to thing about 7 days a week is long sleeve shirts. So you got all these shirts hanging in the closet. But what's interesting, if I were to ask you what does it take for one of these shirts? What do I have to have? What does this shirt have to have on it? Well, generally it's going to have sleeves. David Sproul would look kind of funny standing up here in a shirt that didn't have sleeves, wouldn't he? You'd be like, yeah, that'd be kind of weird to see. But a shirt like this, you expect, it's going to be long sleeve. It's going to have a collar. It's going to have buttons. But I think, and I haven't looked, but I think probably without fail, every one of those shirts that's like this hanging in my closet, and I'm not going to do it obviously, but down at the very bottom of this little strip right here, down at the very bottom of it, what's on the very bottom of this little strip of cloth where the buttons go in, down at the very bottom? Extra buttons. There's on every shirt, there's always those little extra buttons. That's kind of nice because years and years ago, I needed some of those extra buttons. But ever since they started putting those extra buttons on there, I've never needed one. What's the deal with that? You used to need them, but now that they give them to you, you don't need them anymore. It's just kind of weird but here's the deal. I've never needed those extra buttons. Worn these shirts for years. Those extra buttons have been around. They've attended things with me every time, right? But I've never needed them. They're just extra. They're superfluous. They're extraneous. You pick your word that you want. Let me tell you, you're not an extra button, okay? You're not an extra button that just is kind of there with everything else, but you're not needed and you don't need to be used. All right? That's not to say we're going to cut you off at the end and we're going to plug you in, sew you in somewhere. But you're not extra. Okay? Well, Jimmy, you are. You are. I guess you got to think about context there. But you're not extra from the standpoint of not being needed in the church. That, it's kind of nice to have you in case something happens, it's good that you're around like an extra button. No, you're not. You're needed. All right? You're one of those primary buttons that's holding this church together like a button holds a shirt together. You're a primary button that needs to help hold this church together. All right? So that's our Wednesday nights to study right now is every part has got a place. So last week we talked about the fact that we looked at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and we just looked at the fact that there's one body, but it's got all these different parts. But every part that's in that body is a part that's needed. Tonight I want us to, and what we mentioned last week, four classes, first two, last week and tonight, are trying to lay a biblical foundation for this study. And then next week and the week after, the next 2 Wednesdays, will be a lot more practical in their application about how we can take that and put it into practice. So tonight is the second one of just trying to lay some Bible foundation for this study. But what motivates you? What motivates you in anything that you do? Well, you say a paycheck. That's a pretty good motivation. Getting a paycheck. Sometimes rewards can be good incentives, motivation. In a general sense, what kind of things motivate people today? I'm not talking spiritually in the church. I'm just talking general. What motivates people? Friendship. Say it again. Friendship. That's a pretty good motivator. Recognition. That's a big motivator. What motivates people? Money. What'd you say? Say it again. Data points. You're like in a world. Jimmy, don't shake your head like that when I say that, man. Data points. Yes, that's a motivator.
Anything that benefits them.
Say it again.
Anything that benefits them.
Ooh, anything that benefits you. Good grades. Is that a motivator more at the end of the semester than the beginning of the semester? Amen. Okay, just checking. What motivates people? Okay? Bills. Yeah. When you check the mail and they keep coming, it's like, okay. So most of what you mentioned at that point was kind of positive or generally positive, but are there some negative motivators? Fear. Is that a motivator? Pain. Is pain a motivator? There's some men who won't go to the doctor until the pain motivates them to go, right? So, different things that motivate. Now, bring it in the spiritual realm. Inside the church, what is it that motivates me? Commitment. What'd you say? Is that what you said? Commitment? You got to make a commitment. You make that commitment, that needs to motivate us. Does God motivate you? And we're not going to exhaust this by any stretch in the 35 minutes we've got left. We're not going to exhaust this idea at all. But does God motivate us to serve? There's a lot of things we could say motivate us. But what is it about God? I want to throw some at you tonight, and then you think about what's missing from this list, okay? Because I know there's going to be stuff missing from this list. Does the love of God, does that motivate? Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. We'll look at a few different passages tonight, but go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. To me, this kind of goes on the top of the list of motivators, is to think about the love of God. If you were to think about the love of God, what key verse that everybody knows that talks about the love of God comes to mind? John 3:16, right? And I don't even have that on the screen tonight. But you know that. Is that a motivator? Here's what Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14. For the love of Christ, and depends on your translation here on the verb that's going to follow, New King James says compels. Some translations say, I think, constrains. I don't think there's a translation that uses the word motivates. Maybe there is. What other verbs do you have there? Compels, constrains. Anybody have the word moves? The love of Christ compels us because we judge thus that if one died for all, then all died. Does the love of God motivate you? I tell you, if it doesn't, nothing else is going to. It's at the top of the list. If the fact that God loves you doesn't move you to serve, maybe guilt, there's another negative motivator, right? Sometimes guilt can get you to move. But if God's love doesn't do it, nothing else is going to do it. And so think about the love of God. I love Ephesians 3, the closing verses there. Ephesians 3 says that you can't measure His love. Here's a motivator that you can't even comprehend, can you? In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 19, Paul says, as if you could comprehend the width and the length and the depth and the height of the love of God. Could you get your measuring stick out? You couldn't. You won't reach the end of it. Have you ever used like a ruler or maybe a yardstick, and maybe you had a yardstick 3 feet long, but you had a longer distance, so you had to you did the 3 feet, and then you moved the yardstick, and okay, another 3 feet, all right, another yard, all right, another 3, and you kept moving the same yardstick in order to get the distance because you were too lazy to go get, the tape measure out of the garage or whatever. You don't have enough yardsticks to stretch them out far enough to figure out God's love. That ought to motivate us, because what did that love do? It looked down and it decided to send Jesus for us, something that we do not deserve. I don't know about you. This walking with Jesus this year has helped me. I don't know if it's helped you, but it's helped me. And the more time I have been spending in the life of Jesus over this last year, in preparing and getting ready for this year, you can't take your mind and your heart to the cross of Jesus openly. You can't do that and not be moved. Isn't that the reason that God put the Lord's Supper, the communion, every Sunday? What did He know? What? We would tend to forget. So He puts it in there why every Sunday? Just to waste time in worship? To remind us, here's how much He loves you. That's what communion is about. It's not about, you do this, or you're going to eat and drink damnation to your soul. Yeah, that's it too. Do this in remembrance. Remembrance of what? And you sit there and you think, okay, I'm thinking about His body. Okay, now we're taking the cup. I'm thinking about His blood. What's that all about? That's how much He loved me. You can't ever get tired of that, can you? You can't ever get tired of that. Chuck and Marissa back here passing the baby around. You ought to just be so disappointed in yourself. I mean, there's something about the love of a baby, right? You just can't get enough of it. That baby will motivate you to do anything. The love of God. Shouldn't that motivate us as Christians to do anything? He did that for me. Boy, we're not going to have time to get to the other points tonight because I can't get off of this one. He did that. Why did He come here? Was there something wrong with heaven? He needed a day trip down to earth for 30-something years? Something wrong with heaven? Man, there's nothing wrong with heaven. There's everything wrong with earth. But He comes down here. And He does something that I can't do for myself. If you're in verse 14, you drop down to verse 21. What does 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21 tell us? God made Him who knew how much sin? None. He came down here and let the devil tempt Him for you. He dealt with the devil's temptations. And every time the devil came to Him and tried to get Him to do something wrong, you know who Jesus thought of? He thought of you. He thought of you. I can't do this. If I do this, I can't save Brett. If I do this, I can't save Chuck. If I do this, I can't save Mary. If I love them too much, I'm not going to give in to this sin. Knew no sin. God made Him, New King James says, God made Him to be sin for us. What does that mean? God made Him to be our sin offering. We couldn't do it. We didn't have anything to sacrifice. Nope. God made Him to be our sin offering for us. That ought to motivate us. Now, some people have wondered, in verse 14, some people have wondered, the love of Christ compels us. And if you go and read different people's thoughts on this, some people are going to say, that's talking about the love that God has for us. Other people would want you to believe that it's talking about the love that we are to have for God. That the love we are to have for God, the love of Christ, the love we are to have for Christ, that should motivate us. I think it's the first of the two, but honestly, what does it matter? Shouldn't the love that we have for Christ, shouldn't that motivate us? John 14, 15. Now, translations vary on John 14, 15. So if I'm going to start it, but you're going to finish it in different ways. Jesus said in John 14, 15, if you love me, different translations have different endings to that, and you're like, why would different? It's a short verse. Some translations say, if you love me, keep my commandments. And King James, New King James, and other translations will do that. And it sounds like a command, right? If you love me, keep my commandments. You love me? Do what I tell you to do. If you've got another translation, maybe the ESV, maybe New American Standard, it's not do this. What is it? You will. It has the word will. Is that different? He's not saying, hey, if you love me, get busy serving me. Now, does he tell us to do that? Yes. But in this verse, he's not saying get busy. He's saying, you know what? If you love me, you know what you're going to do? You're going to obey me. So the question is, how much do I love him? Is that driving me? When that lawyers get a bad rap, don't they? Even lawyers in the Bible get a bad rap. Now, they deserve it. I'm not going to speak of all lawyers today, but the guys in the Bible, because it says that they were coming to Jesus testing him. How would you like to be that guy? Going to Jesus testing him. Wouldn't you just like, nope, not me, somebody else, not me. But he comes and asks Jesus, what's the greatest commandment, Matthew 22? What did Jesus say the greatest commandment is? That's what we're talking about. What's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord thy God with what? All with all. You know the good thing, you know the cool thing about Jesus is Jesus was always the A+ student. He's always the go the second mile student. Because what did he do? He didn't just give one answer. He gave two. Hey, the guy just says, hey, what's the greatest commandment? What's the first commandment of all? Jesus says, let me tell you what it is. Love God. But he wasn't done talking. What does he say? The second is like unto it. He didn't say the second one, oh, that's different, but I'll tell it to you anyway. What do you mean the second is like unto it? Well, what is the second one? Love your neighbor as yourself. Why does he say it's like unto it? Because if I do this, guess what I'm going to do? If I love God with all of my heart, it's going to translate into how I treat other people. When you think about every part has its place in the church, when you think about what your part is in the church, sometimes I think as Christians, and this is about as natural as you can be, right? Sometimes as Christians, I think we lack motivation. I think, we allow the world to get involved in our lives. We allow discouragement to enter into our hearts. We allow just the busyness and the distractions of living to take us away from where we need to be. And we just kind of, am I the only one who thinks this? That sometimes we just lack motivation to really jump in and do what we need to do. Motivation number one, what ought to motivate us? Is God motivating us? Man, if you pause for just a few minutes and try to think about the love of God, you won't be able, Ephesians 3, you won't be able to wrap your mind around it, which means you won't be able to wrap your soul and your heart around it, which means that ought to be my driving force. I don't just need to think about Jesus on the cross on Sundays when I'm taking the communion. I need to think about it all the time. And if he was willing to do that for me, what would I not be willing to do for him? Y'all got any thoughts? Comments? All right, if you're going to be quiet, we're going to keep going. All right, motivation number two. So God's love, boy, that ought to motivate us. But what about God's expectations? Now, if you were here last week, I brought the last point that we didn't have time for last week and dropped it right here. So this is what we were going to talk about at the end of class last week. Should God's expectations, should that motivate us? You know, growing up, when my parents, I was a weird kid. Okay, I'll finish your thought. I'm a weird adult too. See, I said it out loud for you. All right, but I was a weird kid. You know, if my parents put some expectations out there of things that they expected me to do, not all the time, majority of the time, I did it. You know, if that's what mom and dad want, if that's their, okay, we'll just do it. Now, sometimes it might be, who said fear, motivation, sometimes it might be motivation to fear. You know, and so there could be some negative motivations behind that. You know, Stephen talking, you know, about his dad saying, you know, don't just step over the stick, pick it up and carry it with you. Make use of that trip. You know, good advice for that day and good life advice. But when people set expectations for you, is that a motivator? What about in the workplace? When your boss sets expectations, is that a motivator? I mean, it should be, all right? Let's say it that way. It should be. What about when God lays out some motivations or some expectations for us? Should that be a motivator? Go over to Ephesians 4, just real quick. And I'm just going to put all of this up here because we're only going to be able to stay here for a couple minutes. We were in 1 Corinthians 12 last week, and a good companion passage, kind of a good parallel or commentary on 1 Corinthians 12 is right here in Ephesians 4, because the context is the same, meaning the subject matter is the same. Remember what we said in 1 Corinthians last week? 1 Corinthians 12, 13, 14, 3 chapters on miraculous spiritual gifts, okay? You come to Ephesians 4 and verse 7, guess what the context is? Miraculous spiritual gifts. So same subject matter is being dealt with here. But there is application for us to make, even though those miraculous spiritual gifts were limited to that first century, to those Christians in order that they might confirm the word that was being spoken until it was finally written. There's some application here for us. And so here's some things that we need to consider when we think about God's expectations for us. What is God looking for? And I'm going to start down in verse 16. I'm going to back up to verse 12, and then I'm going to end in verse 16, all right? So you know we're going to go in a loop here. So God's expectations, verse 16. From whom, talking about Christ in verse 15, from Christ the whole body is joined and together. Don't you love how the Bible uses, he could have just said, here's the church and they're stuck and they're together. They're joined together. Okay, but he's vivid. When you think of something being joined and knit together, does that draw pictures, mental pictures in your head? But what is it, this body, the church, what is it that is joining and knitting it together? Keep reading. What is joining and knitting it together? What every joint supplies. There's a lot of answers to this question. What holds your body? I'll get more. Bones together. You've got ligaments, right? You've got tendons. You have joints. Some of you know you have joints because your knees talk to you. Your hips talk to you. Hello, good morning. And it's not a good morning, just wanted to let you know I'm alive. But your joints are what are holding your frame together. Same terminology here. So what is it that holds the church together? But every joint needs to be supplying, according to, he says, the effective working by which every part does its share. What starts happening when your physical body starts to age and every part of your physical body is not doing its share like it used to? Is that frustrating? What? Aches and pains. Is that frustrating when every part's not doing its share like it's supposed to? You look at your body and you're like, hello? I mean, you used to do just fine. What's your problem? and that's why God uses the physical body so much as that parallel, because we understand the physical body. And it's a whole lot nicer when every part is doing its share. And God says, that's the church. The church has all these different parts. You're not an accessory in the church. You're an essential part of the church. You're not an extra button to the church that, well, if we end up needing you, we'll let you know. But until then, no. You're a part. And every part has a place. And every part needs to do its share. Now, why? What is accomplished by this? Go back up to verse 12, and then we're going to loop back around. When we're all doing our share, when we're all participating as God wants us to, what's going to be the results? Verse 12, for the equipping of the saints. What does that mean? Maybe you have a different word, translation, I'm not sure. Perfecting of the saints. When I'm doing my work as a Christian, every part's doing its share. It is equipping and it's perfecting. It's helping the Christians to grow. Now, what's interesting, what's interesting to me, won't be interesting to you, this is just weird, David. All right? What's interesting is that you have the word for, the equipping of the saints. You have for, the edifying of the body. And the terminology just used here is terminology, this is one thing leading to another thing. And so when he says that the church is designed, and the church is over here in order to equip the saints to do what? For the work of ministry. What's ministry? Serving. So when we're all doing our share, we're equipping and perfecting the body to do what? To do more. For the work of ministry. We're not just, the end result is not, well, if we all work together, we'll get done, we'll get this. No. We're continuing to work for the work of the ministry. So it leads into the work of the ministry, and it keeps leading, the next word for, it keeps leading into the edifying or the building up of the body of Christ. God wants us to see this is just a continuous cycle. When we do our share, everybody does its share. It equips and perfects the body. When it does that, it leads us to more service, which leads us to build up the church and encourage each other, which leads us to do more. It's just, isn't it interesting? Sometimes you read about cycles in the Bible and they're not so good. I'm not talking about bicycles or tricycles. I'm talking about like the cycle in the book of Judges. That was not a good cycle, right? Bad cycle for 300 years. Where they turned against God, God sent them into oppression. They cried out to God. God sent a deliverer, and they stayed good for a while, and then it was just the vicious cycle. But this is a different kind of cycle. It says, if I get involved in this, think about gears. When he's talking about this cycle, think about gears. When you think about gears, what are this is not going to make any sense. I don't have any coins. What's on the outside of those gears? Little teeth, right? So they're circles, but they've got these little teeth sticking out. Well, where do those other teeth go in the gear?
They fit together and turn.
They're going into other gears. So that this dude's doing this little gear's doing his job here, but he's got teeth sticking in so that this other gear can, and so, you think about inside of your watch, and you've got all of these gears, but they all have to work together. Why? You can't tell time. We're all different gears involved in the work. And so the expectation of God is that we all need to function and connect and interact with each other. And when we do that, come back, just for sake of time, come back to verse 16. And this is, we might get to this point. But what does it cause? When all of this is happening, I'm going to come back and talk about this more in a minute. I just wanted you to see it, and then we're going to move on. What does it cause at the end of verse 16 when we're all doing our part? It causes increase. It causes growth. Let me ask you a question. Well, it's already on the screen. Oh, well. Let me ask you a question. Is when it says, if we all do our part, we're all these little gears with the teeth, and we're all doing and it says that causes the growth of the body. Is that talking about numbers? That we grow in numbers and we get more people? Or is that talking about interpersonal relationships? Or is that talking about spiritually we grow in our faith and strength All of the above. All of the above. And so, what part do I have in the growth of the church? Anything? We all do. It's not just the preacher's job, elder's job, deacon's job, Bible class teacher's job. It's not just certain people's job. He says here, when every part does its share, when every gear is turning and all those teeth are connecting and there's that interaction. So the question tonight is, what are you doing? And this is, don't misunderstand. That's not guilt motivator coming in, okay? It's just a question. What are you doing to help the church to grow? What part are you playing in helping the church grow? So, does God motivate us? Ooh, does He ever? Does His love motivate us? Big time. What about His expectations? Wouldn't it be, what if God didn't give us any expectations? Would that be weird? Hey, I love you. I died for you. Come over here. I'll save you. Okay, that's it. Would you be like, now what? Right? But He lays these out here. I mean, just go and do this. Plain instruction. Great motivator. All right. Well, hang on. Let me come back. Any thoughts or comments on that? Dirk.
When you talk about gears, they have to mesh together in order to function properly.
Yes.
They have to be lubricated.
Yes.
Because if all of those factors aren't there, it grinds
Yep.
and it causes friction. So our job is to avoid that
Yes.
in order that things will function properly.
Yes. All sorts of applications from those gears, right? Dirk says they've got to mesh together. They've got to be lubricated. You know, we don't need any grinding in the church, right? We don't need any complaining or grumbling in the church. We want the church to so where does the lubrication come in? What is it that lubricates? I know that's maybe a weird thought for you. Fellowship. Grace. Encouragement. What did you say? Edification? What did you say? Forgiveness. So you all are, all of these, we all have different parts and works and things that we're supposed to be doing in order to help the church to grow. But what is it that lubricates? And you all are mentioning things that they're there, but forgiveness is not my work in the church, right? I mean, I'm not the one that's been assigned forgiveness in the church. The rest of you, you don't have that assignment. It's like, hello, that's all of us. And grace, that's not an assignment. Okay, we'll give grace. Gene's good at grace, so we'll give grace to Gene. And no, that's everybody. And so that's what lubricates and gets is to keep. And that's just, isn't that the first motivator here? Isn't that the love? Isn't that love for God, love for each other? All right, motivator number 3. What about God's blessings? Do blessings motivate you? What about the blessings of God? Do God's blessings motivate us? 1 Corinthians 4, verse 7, Paul says, what do you have that you did not receive? Do you have to think long about that answer? What do you have that you did not receive? If you have to think long, you're thinking too hard. Everything that you have came from God. Everything that you have came, whether we talk about the material things, whether we talk about our time, whether we talk about our opportunities, everything that we have came from God. And so I love these verses from the book of Psalms. Psalm 103, David says, we don't need to forget all of His benefits. What does song number 118 in our book tell us to do? Count your blessings. And when you start thinking through the blessings that God gives you, will that motivate you? He's done this for me. He's given this for me. When you look into your past, and I'm not talking about physical things. I'm not talking about material. We can, because your physical and material things, where'd they come from? Don't tell me Amazon. They came from God. Everything we've got has come from God. But I'm talking about who you are as a person. And I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but I want you to think about your parents or your grandparents. For a lot of us, those were blessings from God. And we look back and say, I wouldn't be the person I am today without that. That's a blessing from God. And so when you're thinking about your blessings, don't just look around your house and start counting up the things that you can visibly see. It's everything. And so once you've made your list, I love what the psalmist says, what shall I render to the Lord for all of his benefits towards me? What's that? Motivation. I look at everything God has done for me. What am I going to do for him? Have you ever felt that way? Maybe it was a gift exchange. Maybe it was a Christmas party or holiday party, or maybe it was exchanging birthday gifts, and somebody gives you a really nice present, and then you're going to give them your present for them, and you're like, they either spend a lot of money, or even better than spending a lot of money, they put a lot of time and thought into this. And I got them a $10 Amazon card. You look at your gift and you think, my gift doesn't measure up to this. Guess what? You get into a gift exchange with God. God gave his gift first, right? Gave his gift first. And now it's time for you to give yours. Do you feel, oh, this is kind of sorry. I don't have anything to give back. What does God want you to give back?
What you can.
Give back yourself, whatever you can, whatever you've got. Is he expecting you to do more than you can? Is he expecting you to give more than you can? No. We talked about expectations the last point. God's expectations, they are not beyond our capabilities. 1 John 5 and verse 3 says that his commandments are not burdensome or grievous. They're within our capabilities. And so when I think about what ought to motivate me to serve God, blessings. Look in 2 Corinthians 9 for just a second. I know the verse is on the screen, but I just want you to see the verses around it. And then I'll let you make any comments. We'll go to the next verse, next point. You know the verses leading into verse 8, but we don't read verse 8 as much as we read the verses leading into it. All right, you know the verses leading into it because it says, he who sows sparingly shall reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So each one gives, he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver, leading into verse 8. So then verse 8, you like verse 8 because it says God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you having all sufficiency, you like the word all in this verse? That you having all sufficiency in all things may have an abundance. Yes. All right. So if I give to God, he's going to give me an abundance back. You know what I think we do sometimes? Is we put a period, you're looking, we put a period, I can't hold this still. We put a period right there. And we think, if I give in abundance, God's going to give me in abundance, and boy, this is a great gift exchange. Yes, but read the rest of the verse. That we may have an abundance for every good work. Why does God, the point here is blessings, why does God bless us? So that we can bless others. God's not looking at blessing us as the end result. He's just seeing, where else can this go? 2 Corinthians chapter 1, he tells us to comfort one another. Well, what am I supposed to use to comfort you? The comfort that I got from somebody else. Well, where did that person get that comfort? They got it from somebody else. And you go all the way back, it's like your kids ask, well, where did it come from? Well, where did that come from? Well, where did that? You just keep going back in the chain. Where did it come from? The God of all comfort. Comfort, so that I can turn around and comfort. See, God doesn't look at me as the end result of that comfort. He just says, okay, David can go and do it for somebody else who can go and do it for somebody else. The blessings we have from God, they're unending. That's the way he designed them. And it ought to motivate us. Say, what can I do? Any thoughts on that? Jeff?
I think, as far as the blessing
It is. And that's, it's that snowball effect, it's that chain reaction effect, whatever you want to call it, that the more you do, the more you want to do, and the more natural joy it brings to you. Not, oh, I have to do this. Once we get over that hump in Christian living of, oh, I have to do this. Once you get over that hump and it's, I get to do this, I want to do this, I have joy in doing this. Would you rather do things that you find joy in doing or do things that you have to do? Which one? The laundry pile in your house answers that question for you, okay? All right, the things you have to do, you don't want to do them, all right? Con. Yeah. Say it again.
Does it matter?
What does what matter?
What you were saying about doing things because of joy or because you have to do them. Because, like, what's that guy's name? Jonah?
Yep.
He didn't want to go to that town.
Exactly. No, and so Con asked, does it matter why we do them? Well, initially, and he mentions Jonah as the man who didn't want to go, right? And even when he got there, he was still mad and went and pouted underneath the tree. Have you ever sat under a tree and pouted after doing something God told you? You better watch out. You better read the rest of the book of Jonah. But does it matter why we do it? Well, initially we may do things out of a sense of obligation, out of a sense of, I've been told to do this, and so I am going to do this. Think about, when you were a kid, you probably did some things out of pure obligation. And maybe you think, well, it never changed. I always did. I never wanted to do anything, or maybe. But eventually, you may have reached a point where you wanted to do it in order to please your parents. That's a different level of, I have to do it, well, I'm doing this to please my parents. And I think there's a growth that takes place as a Christian where, now, that doesn't mean we ever grow out of, I do some things because I have to. There's some things in a Christian life that are not necessarily the easy things to do. But I'm going to go and do them because that's what God wants me to do. But we ought to grow in our Christian walk with the Lord that I get to the point where I'm doing things because this is what pleases God. And what pleases God pleases me. It's John 8:29, Jesus saying, I always do those things that please Him. There's just a bunch of verses that kind of flood the brain there. But does it matter? As long as we're obeying, yes, we need to go and obey. But here's what God says. 1 John chapter 5, verse 2. This is the love of God, that we keep His commandments. But I want you to see how it's combined. Keeping commandments is motivated by love. And my love for God ought to drive me to do what not because I have to, and I'll do it if I have to, but because I love God so much, I want to please Him above everybody else. All right, go on the website. Probably on Monday, you can go on the website. There's like 3 other points here, and we're not going to get to them tonight. Any other last thoughts, comments? Awesome. All right, thank you all very much. See you Sunday.